Level 1, the Karting Kid. You are 8 years old the first time you feel it. A go-kart at a local track, engine buzzing beneath you, the wheel vibrating in your hands. You are not fast, not yet, but something clicks. The way the back end slides when you turn too hard. The way you can feel the grip leaving before it actually goes. Most kids just steer. You feel, your parents notice. They always notice. That's the first cost. Not money, attention. Your weekends disappear. School holidays become race weekends. Kart repairs happen in garages, not living rooms. Your father learns torque specs. Your mother learns race regulations. None of you chose this exactly. The track chose you. You start winning. First local races, then regional championships. A trophy that means nothing outside a 200-person club. But the feeling inside the trophy is real. You train on simulators at night. You study racing lines in bed. You fall asleep thinking about apex points and braking markers. Other kids talk about school. You talk about understeer. You do not know yet what this life costs. You only know what it gives you. Speed, certainty, a version of yourself that makes complete sense when the lights go green. Level 2, the junior formula driver. You are 15 and someone important has watched you at a regional final. Not a team, not a sponsor, just a man in a quiet jacket standing near the barrier, taking notes. A week later, your phone rings. A junior academy, a pathway program, real cars, single-seaters, not go-karts anymore. The first time you drive a Formula 4 car, you almost crash at the third corner. Too much power, too much downforce, too little experience. You don't crash, but it's close enough that your hands shake for an hour after. You spend the first season learning to be slow. That surprises everyone who doesn't understand racing. To go fast, you first learn exactly where slow is, where the car is comfortable, where the grip ends. You find the edges and you map them precisely before you push past them. What money enters the conversation for the first time? Your family doesn't have it. The academy provides some. A small regional sponsor provides a little more. Your father takes a second job for a year. You don't talk about it directly. You train harder instead. You finish 5th in the junior championship your first year, 3rd the next. You start getting looks from Formula 3 teams, real looks, the kind that come with numbers attached. Something changes in you during this period. Racing stops being a thing you love. It becomes a thing you are. The separation disappears, and that changes everything about what you're willing to sacrifice. Level 3, the Formula 3 Contender. The step up to Formula 3 is the step where most people stop. The car is faster, the fields are deeper, the margins are smaller. Most junior champions arrive here and discover that the kids they beat before were simply slower versions of themselves. You arrive and discover you belong. Not immediately. The first 3 races you finish outside the top 8. The car feels alive in a way you haven't learned yet. The tires behave differently at this level. The aero washes out in traffic. You need 3 months to stop reacting and start predicting. Month 4, you qualify 3rd. Finish 2nd. A points gap appears. Your engineer is the first person in your professional life who treats you like a technical partner. Not a talent to manage, a collaborator. You spend hours reviewing telemetry together. Oh, your throttle trace against the fastest driver. Your braking points mapped against the lap record. Every 10th is visible, explainable, fixable. You win your first professional race at a circuit you have never seen before. Not your home track. Not a track you practiced on a simulator. A new track, a wet session, a gamble on tire choice that your engineer trusted you to make. You make it correctly. The feeling is not what you expected. It is quieter, more internal. You do not scream. You just breathe very slowly and know something has shifted permanently. Formula 2 scouts attend your next 4 races. You notice them. You do not change anything. Level 4, the Formula 2 racer. You are 19. The grid is filled with people who were also the best in their country, also the fastest in their academy, also the ones who stayed when others stopped. You look at them during the first driver briefing and understand something immediately. There are no passengers here. Formula 2 is where the industry watches. It is the final audition before the highest level. Teams study your racecraft, your overtaking decisions, your tire management, how you respond to contact, how you respond to losing a race you should have won, how you respond to mechanical failure that removes a points lead you spent 12 races building. That last one happens to you in round 9 of your first season. Mechanical failure, DNF, points lead gone. You sit in the cockpit for 40 seconds after the engine stops. You say nothing on the radio. You climb out. You find your engineer. You ask to review the telemetry from the last 20 laps. 2 teams notice that 40 seconds of silence. It tells them something important about patience, about the gap between emotion and performance. You finish your first Formula 2 season 3rd in the championship. Your second season, you win it. 14 races, 9 podiums, 3 wins. The year is not dominant. It is earned, painfully, carefully, relentlessly earned. The night you clinch the title, you sit alone in the motorhome for 30 minutes before your team finds you. Not celebrating, just sitting. Somewhere, a phone is ringing in an office building in England. A conversation is beginning that you don't know about yet. Level 5, the reserve driver. The call arrives on a Wednesday. A team in the midfield of Formula One, not a front runner, not a backmarker, a team with history, budget, and a car that finishes races. They want you as reserve driver. Third car, test sessions, simulator work. Substitute if either race driver cannot start. You accept immediately and spend the next 3 months wondering if you made the correct choice. The reserve role is constructed to be invisible. You work inside the factory. You drive the simulator every Tuesday and Thursday. You give feedback on setup directions. You participate in tire testing programs at tracks where no cameras are pointed. When the race drivers perform well, you congratulate them. When they perform poorly, you say nothing and wait. You learn the political geography of a Formula One team. And the engineers have their own hierarchy. The marketing department has its own language. The principal's office is never fully visible from where you stand. Budget decisions happen in rooms you are not invited into. Driver decisions happen in different rooms. You fly to 7 Grand Prix weekends. You attend briefings. You stand in the garage in a race suit that never actually goes to the grid. You smile in photographs. Then in August, a race driver breaks his hand in a cycling accident. Thursday morning, 9 days before the next Grand Prix. Your phone rings at 7 a.m. You do not sleep for 36 hours. You study data, circuit maps, tire behavior reports, weather forecasts. On Sunday, you qualify 12th. Race day, you finish 7th. Points. Your first points in Formula One. The team principal shakes your hand after the race. Well, the handshake is brief, professional. It means more than most things that have happened so far. Level 6, the race driver. The contract arrives in November, a full season. Both race seats open simultaneously. A team restructuring. You are the option that was already inside the building. The announcement is quiet. A press release. A photographer comes to the factory for an hour. A short video for social media. You stand next to a car with your name on it for the first time. Your name on the side of a Formula One car. You take one photograph on your phone. You send it to your father. He replies with one word. Proud. You go back to the simulator. The season is difficult. The car is not a front runner. Points are earned in increments. A 6th place here, a 9th place in the rain, 2 DNFs from causes outside your control, 1 from a mistake you own completely and review for 4 consecutive evenings. The media asks about your team's car. You answer diplomatically. The media asks about your future. You answer carefully. The media asks about the faster teams. You answer honestly. Yes, the car ahead is faster. Yes, you would like to be in it. Yes, you believe you are capable. That last answer creates a small storm for 48 hours. You do not apologize. You wait. The storm moves to something else. Your points tally at the end of the season. 47. 9th in the Drivers' Championship. For the car you have, it is more than the car should score. The faster teams notice. Level 7, the established midfield driver. Your second season with the team, the car is better. Not competitive for championships, competitive for podiums on good days, on the right circuit, in the right conditions, with the right strategy call at the right moment. You get your first podium at a night race, 3rd place, standing on the box between 2 world champions. The anthem is not yours. You are not bothered. You know what it took to be standing there. You develop a reputation. Not for speed alone, for reading races, for managing tires longer than the data suggests is possible, for making strategy calls from the cockpit that contradict the wall and proving them correct often enough that the wall begins to listen. Sponsorship arrives with this reputation. Not enormous, not headline deals, but your name carries commercial value now. A watch brand, a nutrition company, a technology firm. Your life becomes logistics, planes and motorhomes and circuit paddocks and hotel rooms that all look similar by October. You develop rituals, same music before qualifying, same preparation sequence, same way of sitting in the car before the installation lap. Journalists write profiles. Some understand the sport. Most understand the image of the sport. You learn to tell the difference quickly and calibrate your answers accordingly. You are 24 years old. You have scored points in 41 consecutive Grand Prix. You have never won a race. You know the car that could let you win one. You know who drives it. You know when their contracts expire. You are patient, but you are watching. Level 8, the front runner. The call comes in July, not November, not the normal window. July. The number on your phone is the team principal of a constructor that has won 3 of the last 5 championships. The call lasts 11 minutes, the most important 11 minutes of your professional life. You sign the contract in September, announce in October, arrive at the factory in January. The car is different from anything you have driven. The data is deeper. The engineering team is larger. The expectations are absolute. Nobody at this level accepts finishing 4th and calling it a points finish. Fourth is a disappointment, a discussion, a debrief that lasts 2 hours longer than normal. Your teammate is a two-time world champion. He is not unkind. He is simply faster than you for the first 6 races of the season. The data shows it precisely, sector by sector. You study those sectors the way you once studied karting videos before bed. By race 7, the gap has closed. By race 10, you outqualify him for the first time. He says nothing in the briefing, but his engineers are in earlier the next morning. The first win arrives at race 14, a circuit that suits your style, an early safety car that reshuffles the strategy, a moment midway through the race when the leader pits and the calculation becomes simple. You are on harder tires, you have more life in them, you stay out, you control the gap. Final lap, the team says nothing. You are already counting the gap to the car behind. Driving the last chicane, the flag comes down, the radio breaks open, everyone speaking at once. You say one thing, very quietly, over all the noise, told you. Level 9, the championship contender. The season is different when you enter it with a realistic chance at the title. Everything compresses, every qualifying session, every pit stop, every safety car decision, every point on every Sunday. The mathematics is never far away. You spend the summer second in the championship, 4 points behind, then 12 ahead, then 6 behind after a technical failure in Belgium that removes a certain victory and adds 17 race days to your mental load. Your engineer becomes the most important daily relationship in your life, more important than almost anything outside the motorhome. The ability to manage the pressure together, to remain analytical when the gap closes, to remain precise when the external world is loud. Your personal life has adapted completely to this existence, or it has not survived. The people who understood what this required are still present. The people who did not have not been. You sleep less deeply in championship years. You are honest about this with your trainer. It is managed with discipline, not medication. You run more, you read fiction in the evenings, you try to let the brain find quiet outside the data. You arrive at the final race weekend tied on points, you and your teammate, a first in the team's history. Qualifying, you take pole, he qualifies third. Sunday, the start is clean, lap 1, lap 12, lap 31. The championship is decided by 5 seconds at the flag. Those 5 seconds represent 3 years of work after the front-runner contract, 8 years of work before it. You park the car, you sit in silence for 22 seconds, then you climb out. Level 10, the world champion. The number 1 is on your car. You did not ask them to put it there. They put it there. That is how it works. The year after winning changes the context of everything that comes before it. Every race you drove before the championship suddenly looks different to the people outside the sport, not to you. They look the same then as they do now. Hard, earned, specific. You continue because the car is still the same. The lap is still the lap. The data is still honest. Speed is still the only currency that matters when the lights go out. You win a second championship. You are 30 years old. The conversations about legacy begin. You find them tedious. The car is faster this year than last year. That is the more interesting conversation. You test younger drivers for the team. You sit in briefings with people who were watching you race as teenagers. You give feedback on their technique without thinking about what it costs you. A faster teammate is a faster team. A faster team wins constructors' points. Constructors' points fund better cars. Better cars let you contend for championships when you are 34. You have been thinking about the end for 2 years, not because you want it, because the clear-eyed part of you has always been aware of it. One morning, a father comes to the factory tour with his son. The son is 8 years old. He stands next to the car, and the scale of it overwhelms him. He is not quite tall enough to see into the cockpit. He looks at you and asks one question. Is it fast? You think about the right answer. You think about everything that word contains. The 8-year-old at a go-kart track, the missed winters, the contract that arrived in November, the flag coming down in lap 57. You nod once. You say, you'll find out for yourself. Somewhere, a child is putting on a karting helmet for the first time. They have no idea what this costs. They have no idea what it gives back. The engines start, and the cycle begins.